Hello, everyone, and happy 2021. I know that we are all relieved. I know I'm relieved to say goodbye to 2020. Yes. And I feel so blessed to be here with all of you today and to be here with our really special person today, Michael Nourse. He is really amazing. And what today's all about is about helping us settle ourselves, settle, ground, anchor ourselves so that we can have the most amazing 2021. I mean, we deserve it, don't we? I mean, like, I really feel like that. And one thing I know is that I'm filling up my toolbox with every single tool that there is so that I ensure that I can have the best 2021. And today we're talking a little bit about astrology. And I want you to understand that this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. It is a science, and I use the word science because it is a science, and it's something that has helped me throughout my entire life. As a young person, I just did it for recreation. I used to just love to read what my horoscope said and so forth. But the more I learned about it, the more I really understood how you could really use this tool in a really great way. And for many of us, we remember that, like, that late night punchline about Nancy Reagan and how, her astrologist, which was Joan Quigley, how she was actually behind the scenes helping President Reagan actually choose specific days and times to launch meetings, to have meetings, to collaborate, with the other leaders all over the world. And of course, the Washington establishment was scandalized by the fact that Nancy Reagan dared to use astrology to help the president decide on the timings of things. But really, what she was doing is she was bringing it out of the closet, because this is something that emperors and leaders and kings and spiritual leaders have been using for centuries and centuries and centuries. So this is the tool that we're going to be talking about today. And like I said, I've been using this. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but even with equinox, myself and my two brothers all had our personal charts. And then equinox had its own chart. And trust me, before we would sign any lease, we would actually make sure the perfect time in which we sign that. Even when we hired, top level management people to work with us, we would do their charts. It wasn't the only tool that we used by any means, but it was something that we really viewed as a tool, because we wanted, not just the best person who looks great on paper and can interview well, but we really wanted to understand their temperament. We wanted to understand, can this person close? Is this person a closer? Does this person have the temperament and the constitution? Because we knew, dang, we were pushing the envelope every single day. We were working 24/7, all hands on deck. I mean, it took a certain person that could actually fit into the chart. So, we learned usually the hard way that if we didn't use that chart, inevitably 6 months into that hire, that person was either burning out or they were looking at us and saying, this just isn't the right place for me. But if we would have done the chart, we would have known that. And as a company, you hiring and firing costs the company so much money. So trust me when I tell you, CEOs, founders, people all over the world are using this astrology every single day. So I am so excited to actually have this conversation with Michael today, because I'm going to tell you, this man is an extraordinary astrologer. He practices deep ancient yogic astrology, and the way he approaches this is steeped in study, science, higher awareness, language, and a deep desire to really help people and to use their chart and their personal time stamp to achieve greater agency, purpose, love, and light to their lives. And one thing I know, we can all use this to have a bigger, brighter, more expansive, joy-filled 2021. Okay, so usually at this point, I'm going to introduce Michael right now, but we are not going to do our breaths today because we're going to do it at the end, and Michael is going to lead us. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hello, Lavinia. How are you? It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
I honestly, I could just sit and listen to you talk for the rest of the hour. You do my job better than I do. Very nice.
Gosh, no. And probably I'm feeling so good because I did have my chart done 2 weeks ago with you.
Actually, that was a really amazing day. It just kind of randomly happened that we spoke on the exact moment that Jupiter and Saturn conjuncted in the sky. A lot of America was able to see it. A lot of the world was able to see it. And this is a really extraordinary time because this only happens every 20 years. But for it to happen on the winter solstice, which is when it actually occurred, the last time that happened was 800 years ago. And that's really significant because when Jupiter is what I like to call the minute hand of the clock, Saturn is the hour hand of the clock, and when they come together until midnight, it resets the whole clock for 20 years. In this context, it resets for another, obviously, maybe 600, 800 years, whatever it is, until the next time this happens on winter solstice. But the solstice is very significant, specifically because it's said in the yogic world to be when the world takes an inhalation. It's basically the sun is rising up over the equatorial line. And so this is a form of like breathing that's actually happening on the earth in context. So you can imagine when you take your inhalation point where the exhalation vanishes into the inhalation, very important. We'll talk about it at the end of the session here. But as it starts to ride back up, that's filled with a brand new reset. So we're looking at a really, really epic, big shift that is a big detox actually for the world. And we've been seeing it. We've been feeling it inside of the pandemic. I was smiling while you were talking about 2020. I'm a weird guy in the sense that as a kind of armchair historian and armchair psychologist and then the astrologist aspect of me, 2020 was a great year. It just didn't feel very good. And I understand that, but sometimes you have to go through some really tough things to actually get to become a really tough person, ready and armed for life and really outfitted to survive whatever it is, zombie apocalypse, pandemic, or otherwise. In context, I know that it's been really scary and it's been really disorienting for people, but from an astrological perspective, it's actually really exciting, the time that we are looking at right now. Even today is a remarkable day for the reconstitution of American government and securing the architecture of democracy. And I'm saying that as literally the Capitol is being stormed right now by protesters. So what is he thinking? Well, the thing is that in astrology, we try to sit back as far in the aperture of perspective as we can so that we can really see a large view of life and how the science actually works. And I think, I know you'd wanted me to talk a little bit about how the science works. Yeah, so let me kind of explain it. And the thing is that it has to do with the neurological epicenters in our cerebral cortex and our spine. And it's one of the reasons that I was so excited to come on your program, because Equinox has been a huge part of my life. Level 3 trainers, huge part of my life. And, you know, at the end of the day, these level 3 trainers actually made me a better neurological and physiological specimen, right? And that's a really extraordinary thing. And I'm sitting with the founder who really saw the vision for that, which I benefited from never knowing you, which is really extraordinary for me. And in the complement of that, it's amazing because when we talk about yoga, the first template of yoga is to be in the body. Like it is your launch pad for consciousness. It is a interphase, environmental interphase mechanism, to be honest with you. We have the environment, and then we have our neurological and physiological grid that is exchanging sensory, communication grid with this accordingly. Well, what's amazing about it is I think that, and I do mean this, one of the reasons that humans are so sophisticated is I think the easiest way to say it is you're not going to go see a dolphin city, right? You can't like go underwater and go to visit Whale City or, go see Squirrel Town. It doesn't technically exist. What's so genius about the Sistine Chapel is that God is reaching back out and Adam is reaching back. And this is the thing that Michelangelo got so extraordinarily well, is that human is really designed to create. And so in that grid, we are in co-creation with whatever is happening in this solar system. So it stands to reason for the yogis, they started to investigate, if we can build a wheel, if we can build a fire, then what else is causing us to build with, and how can we build that? And I think what they saw in the system is that the sun really exists as the cortex that gives all of it light. But the Saturn, which is the slowest moving planet and actually rules the tailbone of the spine, this in the creation of embryos spreads out slowly from cells, zygotes, into like this fetus, which actually gives us just the baseline of the cerebral cortex all the way down through the spine. There are 6 neurological epicenters in the spine: right brain, left brain, which is, we'll call it the brain. Then we have the throat, the heart, the gut, the sex, and the root. And people go, oh, the chakras, right? Because that's pretty interphase now. But it's actually not the chakras quite yet. This is right brain and left brain, which is the solar and the lunar, and then twisting down through the spine in a double helix formation. It really activates the organ system accordingly in a parasympathetic and sympathetic process accordingly. And it sounds very scientific, but at the end of the day, the yogis really understood it. For example, the sun rules Leo, which is housed in the right side of the brain, but it's exalted in Aries. Why this is really significant is that the vagal nerve, which runs from the gut, runs all the way up to the right side of the brain. That's how intricate this science actually is. And I think in a lot of ways, people haven't really just bothered to deconstruct it. And I'm that weird kind of doubting Thomas guy that knew that it worked because I had my chart read by a master astrologist 8 generations out of India. But I really needed to understand how they got it. And like yourself, deconstructing is a really artistic process that really can help you find your best way forward in life.
So can you, because for some of us in our community, this is going to be like way over their head. They're going to be like,
oh, forgive me. Okay.
And you're so like genius at what you do. And it's amazing, but could you just break it down just like so that in the simplest of form, so people
Absolutely.
there are like,
Absolutely.
okay, I understand how my intuition is affecting and how the planets are affecting.
Exactly. So forgive my geek chiking out, and thank you for calling me out on it, because I love to do it and I apologize. But the one thing that I would tell you, it's really pretty easy to get. We have the brain, which is literally our awareness grid. Like this is how I kind of help people understand the chakras even. This is, think of it as a Bill of Rights, or also as our actual rites of passage. This is just pure awareness. It's pure happening, pure experience. I experience is here. At the throat, I communicate. At the heart, I desire or I love. At the gut, I choose, right? Because every choice originated actually from, as an infant, we had a choice whether to eat, whether or when to eat. That's the only choice we had. And every choice grows from that. And every choice you make, you then have to digest the food of that. You know, if you're going to watch CNN, you have to digest that outrage. If you're going to watch Fox News, you have to digest that outrage. So every choice.
For years, we've been hearing that like the gut is our second brain. And some people would say the gut is our first brain. So that's
Yes.
kind of that you're just breaking that down to show that the gut is really our first brain.
And that's why I mentioned the vagal nerve, because when you understand that the right brain, which is really just all the information that's coming in, and then the gut, which has an equivalent amount of neurological technology as the brain, is also that sophisticated, then we suddenly are able to plug in and go, oh my God, choice makes life. And even inaction makes life. Even inaction is an action. And this is actually how karma happens. Cause and effect really is just based on choice and the response to the choice. Now, there's almost 8 billion people on the planet making choices every single second. So imagine what an attack on the system that is, right? Like everyone is engaged in making these choices in context. And agency is the most important thing to find, personal accountability and responsibility, because the hardest thing of my job is to really help people understand that if you don't like your life, you have to look at the choices that you've made and assess what new choices you have to make, because those choices have gotten you to a place that you're not happy with. And so we have to find the agency to deliver us to a new world that's really based on choice. And that's literally like an eating process in context. And then the next two pieces down, just to have them, is actually the sex, which is very important. And it's I contribute, because we contribute into like the grid of everything, humanity, philosophy, everything, and making more children is obviously also a contribution. And then the root is really about I exist and showing up for my existence in the ground game of that accordingly. And that's very highly active right now, because Saturn moved into its own sign, which owns the root. And it is literally, we are reconstituting. The whole conversation is now changed about what and how to exist. We've gone down to baseline facts at this point. What do I need for myself? How to, eat, how to feed myself, shelter over my head, and the safety of my community accordingly. That's really where the pandemic has brought us right now. And it's a detox for all of humanity.
Well, I think that's interesting, because it really is like, if people say like, okay, I need to reset. And that seems to be what everybody's talking about. I think at first we were adapting, like we have to adapt to this pandemic, to COVID, to losing our jobs, adaptation. And then it was like pivot, we have to pivot. And now it feels like, okay, now we're at this place of, okay, like, you know what? We kind of know what we know. There's still obviously an unknown out there that we don't really know.
Right.
However, we're a little more settled in what we know in this pandemic and so forth. And it really feels like, okay, for 2021, I have to just reset. Like, what does that reset really look like? And that's why, like, is resonating to me what you're saying so profoundly, because it really feels like the reset is just like, we just have to go back to the basics, human basics, because we have been living, and I believe it's part of what got us so out of balance. We've been haven't been celebrating, haven't been in gratitude, haven't been thankful for just how fabulous these basics are.
Oh my gosh, you've just said the magic words. You really have. It's learning that the baseline is the foundation of life is actually enough. And I think when you get too far away from that into these grids of competition and heavy consumerism and losing this is your mechanism for joy. Your body is the only thing that is going to give you access to joy, whether you decide to sit down or go play a great game of tennis or walk along the beach. At the end of the day, it's those choices in context with your simplicity of the body that should and could be enough. And happiness really happens inside of ourselves, because everything else is subject to disease, decay, and death to a large degree. And our ability to show up to manage that entropy, right, or the decay or the decline of it in context. And I think that it's about learning to be a gardener and in all honesty, knowing when to weed and what to weed. And right now, we're way off of the grid of what matters most. And the 20th century has been fascinating and beautiful and wonderful, but it also really is been very delusional, and in a lot of ways has created I think a over externalization that is requiring us to internalize and cocoon. And that's what I've been really telling people is, don't think of it as quarantine, think of it as cocooning. And what kind of butterfly you want to emerge out as a part of this process in context.
Right.
When Saturn moves into Capricorn, please go ahead. No, please.
Totally. It's like, I was telling someone yesterday, I was doing an interview for Elle magazine, and we were talking about like this reset. And I said, you know, it's a little bit like we've been through like a major earthquake. Like we've just been through a major earthquake. Everything has gotten disrupted. And for the most part, everybody wants to talk about like their new couches they're going to put in, and their new pillows and their new tile. And it's like, well, wait a minute, the foundation is completely crumbled. like I know it's not sexy and it doesn't have swag and it's not going to have a lot of likes when you show people the foundation that you're fixing. But the bottom line is, it's like, first we have to go in and fix like our foundation. And I think that's where those basic needs are. Those basic needs are the foundation. And then
let me explain it this way. So Saturn, and forgive me Capricorns out there, but I mean this in the best way because I love Capricorns very much. And the thing is that Capricorn actually rules the excretory functioning of the human body. And when Saturn moves into Capricorn, which it owns, it sets up a very powerful detox grid. It's an editing process. Really, that's all detoxing is you're just editing what the body doesn't need. And by the way, the reason that it's in the root and it's considered, you know, a fundamental foundational thing, no one wants to talk about the bathroom, but who could live their life if they didn't go to the bathroom? It's so important to have all of that process really working so brilliantly. So Saturn comes along and says, let's look at what's working for us and what isn't working for us. And the easiest way to do that, to be perfectly honest with you, is a pandemic. I'd been seeing it coming for about 6 months. And I was really concerned it was going to be an Ebola outbreak. And I called a client of mine who was an epidemiologist and I said, really concerned. And he said, no, it's not that. We have the protocols in place to deal with that if it should happen. So when I saw the first, spike of Wuhan article, I was like, that's it. And a lot of my doctor clients were saying, no, buddy, you can understand, we've got this figured out here at the WHO. Well, it's been a perfect storm, actually, that has really allowed this pandemic to be different than MERS, which we caught, SARS, which we caught. And also people forget that AIDS was a huge epidemic. We are living inside of an era of epidemics now. This is a norm, and we need to understand that and understand what the easiest way to prepare for these things accordingly is. And I think that you mentioned disaster, and it's interesting. It's an allegory I've been kind of playing with a little bit, and I'll try to explain it very quickly. There's a wonderful old disaster movie called The Poseidon Adventure. And they're on a big luxury. You remember this movie?
Yeah, I remember.
And they're on a big luxury liner on New Year's Eve, and they get hit by a crazy typhoon or tidal wave, and it turns the boat upside down. And there's about 10 people in the cast who's our hero, and they figure out the only way to even get to survival is you have to go to the engine room because it's upside down. So you have to travel up the boat upside down, right? And there's an extraordinary, to me, allegory because the 20th century has been dumped over. And in order to get to the 21st century, we've really got to be thinking about the things that the 21st century really is. And primarily, that's the technological revolution that a lot of us have not been wanting to really talk about, right? We got the Industrial Revolution, then we had the Atomic Age, and then we kind of have couched the technological revolution in the Atomic Age, but it is really different. Social media has changed everything in context. And we've seen this with even our electoral process. So in this conversation of misinformation, disinformation, and finding our way to true information, what we really have to show up for is the facts. Like, how do I find the facts of any situation? Take the emotion out of it and understand the boat is upside down. And what does that mean for my life? If my life is upside down, what are the primary things that I need? And I would say that one of the hierarchies of needs, particularly now, because we've learned as a leisure, because the 20th century, if it gave us nothing, it really gave us a huge leisure capacity, right? This was the first century where people weren't working day to night on farms and all these other kinds of factories and situations.
It was a lot of desire and pleasure.
Absolutely.
Desires, my wants, not my needs.
And that doesn't have to go away, but it does have to get us back to needs in order to get to next levels of desires accordingly. So the boat's upside down, and ask yourself, okay, with my boat upside down, what really matters? Well, one of the things that really matters is self-care. And another thing that really matters is agency. You really want to be in charge of your decision-making process. And if you feel like you're not able to make those things, and you need to find people and ways to help yourself find that. And that's ultimately what astrology can be very, very, very good at. Is my job at the end of the day is to get myself out of the way, be an expert on the clock while you're an expert on your life. And then we put our Dr. House diagnostic team together here, and we figure out exactly how to make the most out of your talents, your obstacles in life, and what time the clock is actually tolling on the timestamp, because each one of us carries a timestamp. And that's the moment that we take a breath. And at that moment, we plug into the matrix, because the one thing that all of us are going to do our entire life, even if you're in a coma for a period, is breathe. That is the qualifying and quantifying thing that connects all of this together.
So I have a question for you. When you talk about agency, I work with a lot of young women, especially. And one thing that I've definitely noticed, I would say, maybe even in the last 2 years, is one of the issues that they think they have is anxiety.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be that. And I hear them saying, I have low-grade depression. And I'm like, they didn't go to a doctor necessarily to get that prescription, but I guess from everything they're reading, it's like, I have anxiety, Lavinia, I'm anxious, I have low-grade depression. And like, I'm thinking to myself, like, why? Like, that's an agency. Like 9 times out of 10, as we know, addictions and things like this, they come from an emotion. Like, show us how, like, an emotion that we haven't really honed in on, we haven't looked at, we haven't worked on. So in astrology, like, because again, I love making things practical and filling up their toolboxes that's an agency, right? Being able to handle your emotions, being able to handle how to share with us how astrology, knowing that, could be helpful.
Look, I can talk about it in a couple of ways. The first thing I would say is that anxiety and depression, to a large degree, comes from not showing up to let fear and pain be your friend.
Right.
They are ministers in the system. If your ankle is bothering you when you're running, your ankle is telling you either you need new track shoes, you need a new adjustment, you need to be learning how to run more properly, but something needs to be handled in the context. What's happened in this leisure world of the 20th century is that we have moved away from pain and discomfort being our friend. fear being our friend. It's information, and we need the information, and we need the conversation with the information in order to make the proper choice to move ourselves forward. So I don't think people should be afraid of their anxiety or afraid of their depression. I think they should be having a conversation with it, like sit it down in a chair.
Right.
And there are like planetary constructs that will actually present as an overabundance of fear circuitry, overabundance of, you know, anger circuitry, overabundance of sadness circuitry, but it's something to work with. And it's really kind of life circumstantial, as well as the way we process that information accordingly. The moon rules the left side of the brain, and this is associated with what I call psychologic. And I like to put a little break in there so that everybody understands that a lot of our logic that's in there is psycho, because we formed it by the time we were basically 9 years old when we formed our psyche fully in context. You're not capable of asking really sophisticated logic questions. And it's one of the things that I would actually say, because I know you've got a big, huge life ahead of you with a lot of really interesting things to do. And the thing I would say, it's really true, Lavinia. And the thing I would say is that one of the areas that I would lean you into with all of your work is, you know, the Greeks were really expert at logic, and they started to teach their children logic at 3, 4, 5 years old. Being able to break down a problem with just basic logic and scientific thinking, that's what's been so sad for me as a geek, and I'll own that. But in watching like the pandemic, I think what's been the scariest thing about it, and also the saddest thing about it, is how many people have just walked away from science altogether. And I'm like, based on what? Like, right. Based on what are you walking away from science? And that to me is where I think the boat got upside down. Mm. And it's interesting to me to hit that allegory a little too hard. You know, they're traveling towards the engine room because they're upside down. The engine room on a boat is at the base of the ship. So you have to travel up to the engineering room again to really, really think through this whole process and figure out what is going on. What do I really need? I think that all...
Like, tell us a little bit, like, I know you love some books. I know there's, you know, and we are going to get into when it might be the right time for somebody to actually embark on a reading, but what could be like, how could somebody navigate, meander into connecting to those needs, like those logic needs? What might be ways to explore that?
You know, it's a great question. And here's the first easiest answer. Understand that there are two faces of this beautiful clock, and they're called night and day. And it's really important to connect with the sun and connect with the moon and connect with the process of the moon accordingly. When the moon is waxing, we are in emotional growth periods. When the moon is waning, we are in emotional detoxing periods, just to be inside of that grid. And listen, if you think I'm crazy, understand that literally every emergency room in the United States and everywhere in the world goes a little bit nuts on the full moon.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and why? Because moon really, it's the closest body to our planet, and it controls water, and we're 92% water. You cannot tell me we don't have a relationship with the moon. So if you can do it, get your body out under the moonlight, get your soul out under the stars in the moon, and letting that happen for you. Like, feel that grid of day and night. Don't take it for granted. Same thing with the sun.
Is there an app that you recommend for people to know when the moon is waning, or is there?
There is actually. I'm forgetting the name of it, but is it possible for me to send it to your viewers afterwards?
No, guys, we'll put that on laviniaerrico.com when we have it, because it's
a wonderful little moon app. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a wonderful little moon app. And look, I'll tell you something. It's really valuable for women in particular, because one of the things that we've seen over and over and over again, and I mean, this goes all the way back to the menstrual hyde, is women, when they were living in villages together, in homes together, a lot of times they will cycle together, right? And ideally, what we say in Ayurveda science, which is basically the science of food and life, is what it translates to. This is literally just the balancing ourselves with the organic nature and the organic world in general. And I think that we like to say that it's really valuable to ovulate with the full moon. Like if you can get your cycle on the full moon, that's really super healthy, because the flood is coming, it's up, it's up, it's up, and then we're detoxing, because the menstrual cycle is a detox mechanism. If that egg is not going to be fertilized, then it has to be detoxed out of the system accordingly. So I really think for women, and it's true for men too, but for women in particular, just having a deep relationship with the moon and knowing whether it's waxing or waning, that's a huge leap forward in organics. That's just getting back to basics. That's finding nature beyond the city and the city lights that are shining us out of our experience with the sky, which is very important. Same thing with the sun. The sun is always on a trajectory of movement on the basis that, yes, it's the center of the solar system, but our Earth is in a different place as it moves around every year. So yes, we're technically the center of the clock, but we're a cog as the center of a much larger clock. And I think that it's important to have a relationship with sunlight in that really extraordinary way. Just that alone, and breathing in sunlight, will really connect you to the organic qualities of Earth. And what that does is allows your physiology to just naturally realign. So your health is going to improve without even taking a pill or going to see a doctor. And that's an amazing thing. I've really experienced it from my own personal yogic journey here. It's a big part of it. I always want to know what's going on in the sky. All right, and not just as an astrologist.
Let's definitely get that. I've been doing that for the last couple of years. And I actually, one of the girls on my team, Paula, is really amazing with making sure before we choose dates, before we launch something, to make sure that where we are in the moon. So,
well, it's interesting. I would tell you that, like, when I have mothers that are in process of getting pregnant, if they have a safe place or like a backyard where they can actually just bear their breast out under the moon, it's a really wonderful connect die. Like the moon actually represents mothers in the situation and of just humanity in general. That's where I see the mother in the chart, is from the moon. And I've never seen it fail me. Like, this is what was so amazing about the science, is it's incredibly legitimately accurate. And I think that nature is really calling all of us. And I think what really happened is the 20th century got us all a little drunk on our own creativity and our leisure cycles, and we forgot to be in harmony with nature. And now that is shifting back in a newer direction. And I think it's a very exciting time. I know it's been very scary for people, but I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the US chart, as well. But I do think that there's some pretty exciting things going on right now, and I've never felt more optimistic. And I know people are like, what? But I'm going to quote this beautiful quote from Meister Eckhart, where he says, what the masses see is the end of the world, the masters see is the emergence of the butterflies. I think that's what's happening, to be honest with you. We are cocooning. It's a nice little metaphor, but it's very true. And I think that one of the things that's very hard for us to understand right now is we've been so, and I've done it too, but we've been kind of selfishly plugged into, what do I want and what do I really want to achieve and what am I about? But you can only do that in context of a community. And so we do have communal responsibilities here.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, if I'm not of service, I just don't feel alive. Like, right. I definitely know that when I'm connecting and helping and participating and collaborating for something like way beyond myself or my brand or like out there in the world, like that's where I feel like the magic really happens. when I stay so myopic on us and inside out and like I don't feel that breath, that expansiveness, that that something bigger. Like I know I always need to be of service and giving and be in that realm to feel real possibility.
I agree with you 100%. And it's what it does for me is actually reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita. And that's the other thing that I was going to say is you said, what other things can we do? Well, look, there have been some great self-help books, and there's been some extraordinary advances in psychology here. But I also think that it's really valuable to go back to some of these really old texts like the Bhagavad Gita. Stephen Mitchell has an excellent translation of it. The Tao Te Ching, extraordinary book. It's not easy to get, but it's okay if you don't get it at the first read. Like just read maybe a page every other day and just see if you can sink into what these masters were really saying, because there have been some extraordinary awakened beings on the planet. And I will speak even from my own Gurudev, who's extraordinary. He can stop his heartbeat at will, stop his heartbeat at will. Imagine what kind of agency you're talking about, that kind of yogic control over the physiology, which we don't believe is possible. And yet there are people in the world that can do miraculous things. Why? Because we're a supercomputer. That's why I'm so confident that AI is never ultimately going to challenge us, because this is a better, more sophisticated computer than you could ever build as like wires and parts.
Amazing.
It's a beautiful time to be alive. And if there's one thing I could tell everyone, there's an old Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. All right, we've been cursed. But what I've learned about astrology is that every curse resolves into a blessing if you really show up for the lesson that's in front of you. And I feel so confident that the human race will really show up for this conversation once they understand that what's at stake is your own self-empowerment. That's been what's so amazing about the American election, is that, almost 155 million people turned out to vote. That's more that has ever turned out to vote, ever. If that doesn't tell us that people are interested in understanding how they have agency and power in their own lives, that, to me, that's the path forward to the future.
Right.
Innovation begins with that.
And also figuring out, because we are so divided. Like we are so divided, and on both sides, people did come out. So how can we come together to create some kind of a being, an essence, that there's room for on both sides,
Absolutely. It's a beautiful question. And it's a beautiful question. And it's a question that astrology really answers as well, in my humble opinion. I think that, it more than anything else, it's about understanding that everything is having a conversation with everything else. The planets are having a conversation with our neurological system. I wouldn't be able to do what I do. I sit in front of strangers all day long and I talk to them about their relationship with their mother, with their father, with their husband, with their children, and I get it right. And the thing is that how am I able to do that? Because I'm tapping into data. I'm just trained as a data analyst more than anything else, which means the data exists. So if the mainframe of a country, a nation, a people, or a conversation at large has become so discordant that it's stagnating, all we have to start to do is really begin to listen to each other, because we are humans. And if we will show up for the conversation of maybe we each have a piece of this puzzle together, and find those cooperative places first, those places that we can all agree on. Let me give you a perfect example. I don't think there's anyone in this country, honestly, maybe a few, that doesn't think that we all should be entitled to education and healthcare. Like, I just think that's a very easy get. Right. That everyone deserves, to not feel in fear of disease, and everyone deserves to get ahead if they have the opportunity. So we can start there. Now, the how do we get there? That's a a more subtle, more delicate conversation that probably involves more of a center path than an extreme path. And what's happened in the world of social media is it has literally pushed us apart into these extremities. And a perfect example, and look, it's just my experience. I was very clear how much defund the police was not going to play. I was just abundantly clear because of what was happening from session to session to session and what people were telling me about it. And what was funny to me is you just need a new word. If you'd said rethink the police, we can all like that creates and institutionalizes a conversation around what are police and what do we need them for? Because there's good police out there. They're not all bad people. And they're doing important jobs. There are women in the city who live in a city and walk home at night from their cars to their apartments, and they need protection and safety.
Yeah.
So in context of that, if defund is what I would call an attack word, right? Rethink is a reach out word. We're looking to achieve something. And this is the thing about language. Mercury is the planet that rules language. And I call it the great alchemist. Because at the end of the day, magic always happens with what? Abracadabra, a spell, a mantra, right? It's language. And it's learning that language is not just a coercive tool, which it is, but it's a legitimately communicative tool that allows us, and I think the secret to it, by the way, and I really mean this as someone who's been doing it for a long time, I really feel like that the secret to it is learning to hear how they're hearing it. And then find the words that will trigger their ability to hear it in a way that you want them to hear you.
Right.
Then everything changes and we're in the magic of communication. The spell has been cast and we're all getting along better. And I think that's really what could happen now with this very interesting election.
Well, you're talking and I'm thinking like, I started doing transformational work, I don't know, probably like 35 years ago.
When you were a child, to be honest with you.
I mean, I think I did my first Indian sweat lodge. I was 18, but, and I'm thinking, wow, I wish we could get all these people to do even just landmark, like they could start changing the conversation. They could start changing the language because like you said, I always remember saying with this, you could make magic, the abracadabra, or you could start a war.
That's right.
It is that powerful. What comes out of our mouth is, even in our family dynamic, I know for myself, I want to speak my truth. It's important for me to speak my truth, kindly and to the people that I love. But so often when you do speak your truth, that triggers something from them.
That's right.
So, it does take something to be able to get into their listening, to understand how is this going to land for them, knowing they haven't done the amount of work that I have done. They haven't done this. They, how do I break it down? Because I do have a deep desire to have people in my life that I love so much that haven't been on my path, but I still so want them to be in my life. And yet I also have to be true to who I am.
Well, this is one of my favorite moments of the whole protest this summer, actually. And I have a lot of friends who are people of color and a lot of friends who are immigrants. And that video of Black parents talking to their children about how to deal with the police. And I have so many Black friends that had never told me that this was a reality for them. And I must have watched that video 6 times because I was like, it just opened up a whole new vista. Like they were telling me about their life from inside their own skin. And to me, as someone who tries so hard not to see color, I needed to see color and I needed to understand it from that perspective and context. And I feel like that's a beautiful example of we need to not just talk from inside of our own skin, but we need to put ourselves into other people's skins so that we can really understand this dialogue accordingly. Like, I don't think the haves and the have-nots are that far apart. It's just that a lot of the have-nots don't understand or didn't have the opportunities or the education system to be able to know that it really is on you to make it on your own. Like it's like if you aren't lucky enough to have a father that could pay for your college or these kinds of things accordingly, and that's a lot of people in the world,
It isn't
then you
even just paying. It's like, I remember helping some of the people that work for me at Equinox, and like helping their kids fill out applications for college, helping
right.
kids fill out the financial forms, because the parents did not have the education or the wherewithal, the knowledge to even help them do that. I helped them write their essays,
Right.
like, it's like they're really, and these were smart kids, but you know what? All the other kids that came from wealth were getting tutors and consultants and
Exactly.
hiring people that were helping them write up these, unbelievable applications. That it's not fair. So it's no
Yeah.
wonder these kids are getting in and these kids aren't getting in.
Yeah, and that's another point of the fact that I really do want to say. I do, it's like sometimes people need to understand that the truth is tough, and the truth is tough to hear. And I have a very dear friend of mine that I buried in the AIDS era, and he was literally my very best friend I've ever had in life. And he used to say, "Honey, why be mean when the truth is always meaner?" And the thing about that is the truth of even the Constitution, like it says all men are created equal. First of all, there's a lot wrong with that sentence, just starting with women aren't in the sentence.
Yeah.
And the reality is that our situations are not equal. They're not. And the reality is that I don't know if the playing field can ever be leveled, but I know that we should all want equal opportunities. And let me tell you why. Because some of the greatest innovators in the history of the world have come from far, far, far behind and literally had nothing, and literally fought their way up to something and created something that all of us were able and capable of expanding and improving our lives. And this is the value of literally showing up for the wonder of what helping each other get ahead can really do.
You know what? I love this conversation, and I can go all
I
day
know.
on this. It's amazing. I just want to bring us back to, because I promised everyone that we would have you lead an amazing little breath work for us. But
Sure.
so if we're going to break it down to, okay, so we kind of talked about bringing it down to the basics, our basic needs. We talked
Right.
about logic and going into, creating truth and information in a very factual way, correct?
And let me just addendum that really quickly.
Uh-huh.
Here's how you know when you're in logic or when you're in emotion. If you're having a strong reaction to it, you're in emotion. You're not in logic. Like logic, you may not like the truth, but the truth is very identifiable. I heard someone say the other day, we're living in a post-truth world. No, we're not. If you jump off of a 10-story building, you're probably not going to survive it.
Right.
That is not a true statement, post-truth world.
Right. All right. So what could a couple other things, knowing what you know about 2021, what
Yep.
are some other things that we can lock into, anchor to help us have a more beneficial year?
Okay. So everyone wants to try to edit your life down to the basic needs right now. Just focus there. If you're in a job and it's paying you, stay there for right now. And you can certainly look, but absolutely, like, be careful and understanding that you're knowing that I need to take care of my basic needs and necessities accordingly. And you can build all your fun and your luxury off of that. And self-care should be a part of that. I personally think every human being can benefit from meditation and breath work. Breath is the one thing that will absolutely fuel and make the whole system stronger. And the reality is that if you're really stressed, just taking a deep breath will completely change the paradigm. It's that big of a deal. So I feel like every human being on the planet right now should be showing up for breath work and a little bit of quiet, whatever that quiet is. There are meditation apps that are useful. There are extraordinary free meditation opportunities out there. Vipassana is one thing that I would point people towards. There's a lot of opportunity accordingly to really learn how to quiet down your mind enough. Because when the neurological system quiets down, you have more opportunity to see how big the perspective is. The other thing I would say is very important is because Saturn is throwing its gaze on the psychologic aspect of the brain, please do not overreact. Do not get super emotional. If you're super emotional right now, identify I'm super emotional. Go watch a Netflix show, go do a run, a Pilates, studio session, a yoga class online, whatever it is, but identify that when you're over emotional, you need to remedy that before you do anything else.
I love that. I mean, I know I put on music and I dance.
Perfect.
I literally just, and now I've even left, I left a speaker and my iPod in the bedroom that I dance in because I know
Perfect.
I'm going to be dancing a lot.
Perfect. It's a perfect way to do it. It absolutely is. The other thing we've talked about, but have a relationship with nature. I really legitimately mean that. Nature is a place that you can go and literally nature will teach quiet to you. Nature will teach the organic nature of who you technically are. So that's a really, really healthy, important thing to do. And by the way, laying down on the ground is a really healing thing because the earth has a magnetic field that connects to your magnetic field. And there's a lovely exchange of power and healing that happens just from laying on the ground. That's a healing thing.
I just had this visual. I can't wait for the next full moon. I'm going to go outside in my backyard. I'm going to lay on the ground and I'm going to let my breasts get completely infused with the energy of the moon.
It's a healthy thing to do. It's a really healthy thing to do. I'm telling you, ladies, for all the ladies out there, it is one of the best things you can do is just be aware of what the moon is doing. Like she is your friend. I promise you, she is so your friend and your ally in the world in context.
I don't know why, but that got me so excited. I'm like, there's something about that just, I'm like, okay, I'm going to really do that. I am going to have a little ritual of that because it just feels so healthy, especially because our breaths are right in front of our heart.
Absolutely.
So often, we go like this, and it felt like it would be this cleansing of just releasing pain and sorrow and heartache and stuff it always made sense to me in a weird place that breast cancer is right in front of the heart for women. I don't know why, but I always
it's so brilliant that you're pointing that out. And that's why I'm telling you, as someone who's crawled down the rabbit hole of all of this, as you've seen at the beginning of the call, I just really want you to understand that the moon exalts in the heart grid, actually, in the cardiovascular circuitry. And the reality is that it is so deeply connected to the breast. It is just so much about nurturing. And my favorite moon constellation, which is a whole nother rabbit hole we'll go down another time, that this constellation is associated with milk, with breast milk. And what's really amazing about it is that it's housed inside of Cancer, which is where the moon is. So this is such a luxurious, important piece of the puzzle. And you as a mother know, and it's one of the things that I tell women, there's 6 senses. There's 5 senses. And then the 6th sense is the intuition. And what I say about intuition is that intuition is really just us taking information directly off of the electromagnetic grid, because we live on electromagnetic grid. Well, there's a 7th sense in my experience talking to a lot of women, that once you've been a mother, as a gateway to another human life where a soul has come through you into the toddling off into the world, that also opens up a whole nother thing. Because I know a lot of mothers out there who feel very telepathically connected to their children. They just know when something is up.
Well, I know we're going to do a parenting one because There's so many layers to what you just said that really are just magical. Okay, let's do this breath work.
Let's do the breath work already. Okay, forgive me. I'm
Integrity
such
in
a
the
talker.
sun.
You know, you bring out the talker in me,
I
Lavinia. It's all on you. Okay, so the thing that to really understand about this particular breath is this breath will reset you, and you can do it every single day. First thing what you do is when you're sending in your body, find the tip of your tailbone. Very easy to do, actually. And you're going to take the inhale and you're going to inhale all the way down into the tip of that tailbone. And as you're inhaling into the tip of the tailbone, then stack the breath up the vertebrae. Literally, you're going up the whole body into the top of your head until that's filled. When you get to the top of your brain and you feel it, now start the exhale and exhale out. And as you're exhaling out, drive that breath out of your body and down, down, down back through the 6 chakras, we'll call them, the 6 neurological epicenters of the body. They really are that. When you get back to the tailbone, continue the breath right back up. So you're rising up with the breath until you get into the brain and you've got breath in your brain, and then you breathe the breath out and you follow that all the way down back to the tailbone. Even 3 times a day, this will change your relationship with your entire spinal cord, your entire nervous system accordingly. Because this is literally what the breath is doing. We're inhaling all the way down and throughout the entire neurological circuitry, and all the oxygen is running everywhere. And then it's collecting the CO, the carbon and the monoxide, and it's literally taking it to the lungs and breathing it out from everywhere, from the brain, from the throat, from the heart, from the gut, from the sex, and from the root. Breathe into the tailbone, fill it up all the way up to the brain, and then breathe it out from the brain all the way down like you're pressing it, pressing it, pressing it out, and emptying the body so that you can breathe it through again. And it's that continuity of breath, not stopping, that is the most extraordinary gift to human beings.
That feels amazing.
Doesn't it?
Now, do you ever use a mantra with that or no?
I do, actually. There's a very simple but very beautiful mantra called the Soham mantra. It means I am that, and we are everything. This idea, and this is the interesting and salient point in yoga, is that we're ultimately going is we're wanting to understand our full level of yogic connectivity so that we cease to just be us and we start to be everything all at once, and understand that we're just one pixelated point of view of a much larger mainframe of consciousness that's pushing through the world of matter as all these different Lavinias and Michaels, Lisas and Lydias. And it's like, there's a much bigger world happening, and it's the mainframe of consciousness. So the Soham, you inhale on So, and you exhale on Hum.
Is it HAM or
H-A-M.
Huh?
H-A-M. It has a little bit of an ah sound to it. Hum. So.
That feels so good.
Isn't it nice?
Yes. Michael, I feel so blessed and so lucky and just so really full that I know you and that you're doing what you're doing. And it's really amazing. I'm really, you're just like, you found your lane. You're a genius at what you do. You're just a really special human being. And the fact that you're making or helping create like human beings to really be the best version of themselves. And what's so amazing about what you do is, you know, you work with really high up people. So they influence so many people. So really, your expertise and your influence is just so huge because of the leaders that you make a difference in their lives. And we all know that then we go and make a difference in all of our communities. So,
Well, you're a living example of this, and I really want to say that because, and I really mean this as someone who really has benefited from Equinox enormously, and I mean really, it changed my life. The level 3 trainers changed my life and the way I think about it. And I want you to understand the way I see it is I'm not a big fan of trickle down economics. I don't think it works, but trickle down consciousness absolutely works. At the end of the day, you start up there and it does filter down through the system. And you're a living example of that because before I ever met you, you had touched my life in major, 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 huge ways. And I am forever grateful to you and for the vision and the work and the way that you lean in for life and everything that we can do to help each other. I think you're an extraordinary human being, and I really appreciate you tremendously.
And I really believe that, astrology has been a big part of my life. And I am so happy to have you on the third act of my life, because as you say, that's the life what a lot of big things are going to happen. And that fills my heart because it's about helping make a change. So for that, so guys, we're actually going to be running a contest. So go on to laviniaerrico.com. I believe they'll be putting some stuff on Lavinia Joy on Instagram, and we're going to be having a contest to give away a full session, an individual session with Michael. And trust me when I tell you, you want this session. Like, there is no doubt you want this session because it's very detailed. You really get a lot of clarity about who you are and just how to set yourself up in a really mindful, conscious, deliberate, purposeful way in order to have success, not just for this year, but like for the next 5 years. So it really is amazing. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Lavinia. Namaste.
Namaste.